Now, today we celebrate the hope and peace promised to us by the birth of a baby born to a single mom in a time where there was no one more ostracized in society than a single mother who had her child out of wedlock. Mary knew what might happen to her when God called her to carry the Messiah, but she embraced that responsibility anyway, and she carried the child. This baby was special, not just because he was the Son of God, but because, like all babies, he was created by God. The Supreme Court is currently deliberating over Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, which is a very important case that could overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, this wouldn't end. It would be a great step, for sure. It would not end the stain of abortion on our country, but it would be a hopeful step in that direction. And today, as we celebrate the birth of Jesus, we ought to pray for the births of millions more. Nate Kellum is founder and chief counsel of the Center for Religious Expression. He's had a firsthand look into the deliberations by the Supreme Court. Would you please welcome to our show, Nate Kellum. Great having you here, and very timely, because over the past couple of weeks, the Supreme Court, they've heard the case from Mississippi. You were there for those deliberations and heard. Tell us from inside the courtroom what you thought was really significant that you picked up on.
Well, I don't want to count my chickens. I don't want to count my justices before they hatch.
Which are sometimes chickens, by the way, just to be sure.
Certainly. But I am very optimistic, and I was very excited about what I heard. The reason was, going into the Supreme Court arguments, we knew that there were probably three justices, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Breyer, who would probably support Roe. And then three others, and that would be Justice Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch, that probably would not. What you didn't know about were the other three, and I was really encouraged. Like Justice Kavanaugh, and I thought he was spot on, Mike, because what he talked about is, he said the Constitution is really silent on the issue of abortion. It's neither pro-choice nor pro-life, so why are we in the abortion business?
And I think that's been the big conversation since 1973. The court was only supposed to look at what did the law say, and there was nothing in the federal law, and certainly nothing in the Constitution, that dealt with abortion. And they made up something in order to federalize it, because at that time they knew the legislature didn't have the will to make a decision one way or the other. So we ended up with a legislative fiat from a judicial branch, which is in itself unconstitutional.
That should never happen, and that's exactly what happened with Roe versus Wade. But I'm very hopeful we're finally getting to the point where we're going to put that case to an end.
Nate, some people think, well, if Roe Wade were repealed, it means abortion is illegal. But it doesn't really mean that. It just turns it back to the states.
No, but as you mentioned at the top, it's a very hopeful step, because what it does, the Supreme Court should have never, as Justice Kavanaugh noted, should never been in the abortion business. It's really the domain of the people. It's of the state. So it goes back to individual states. And what you'll have is that, well, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, if Roe versus Wade is overturned, well, you're not going to see abortions there.
Yeah.
But you probably will continue to see them.
Praise God.
Great.
None.
But you'll probably still see them in New York and California.
You know, one of my first forays into politics, and part of the launch into it for me was helping to get on the ballot and get passed. It took us 3 attempts in 3 separate elections, but a constitutional amendment to the Arkansas Constitution that said that the policy of the state would be to protect a child from the moment of conception until natural death. So it's already been decided in Arkansas if this were to be overturned. And other states have had similar situations as well. The big question, I think, comes, what's next? Where will this go? Even if this case gets settled, is there yet another step that we might see that would bring us back to sanity and a civilized society where we don't take the lives of unborn children at will?
We need to get to that point, Mike, and we need to get to that point in our lifetime. First important step is let's overrule Roe versus Wade, and hopefully and prayerfully that is what will happen come June. But we need to have a personhood recognition of the baby. Once we have that, then abortions are criminalized everywhere.
Because they would be protected on the 5th and 14th Amendment.
Yes.
Because you can't deprive a person of life or liberty without due process. And if a child is taken, his life taken in the womb, there's no due process. And his life and his liberty has been robbed from him without a due process. So personhood is really what we need to get to, isn't it?
It's absolutely critical. And Mike, in this day and age, when we can see what we can with an ultrasound, how can we not see a person?
All right, I want you to explain to us, you head up the Center for Religious Expression. Sounds important. What do you do?
Well, it is important. We protect the fundamental rights of Christians, fellow believers, so that they can exercise their faith, share their faith, and just quite simply live out their faith. There's a time when perhaps that wasn't so difficult in America, but now it is.
Nate Kellum and the Center for Religious Expression are doing meaningful work. They're helping our country to stay on track. I know you'd like to learn more, and it's easy to do. Just visit the website, Huckabee.tv. There is a direct link to what Nate and his organization are doing.